All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope all of you guys had an incredible weekend. We are one sleep away from the launch of the 2025-2026 NBA season. I'm very, very excited. I have some final preseason takeaways, a bunch of different stuff I want to get into. So I thought the best way for us to put that together today is to call it the 5 big questions before we start the 2025 NBA season. We're going to be bouncing all over the place. Going to hit some stuff with SGA as well as with the Thunder as a whole. I'm kind of interested in this idea of like what teams are capable of upsetting Oklahoma City versus what teams are not capable of upsetting Oklahoma City. After that, I'm going to give some last minute takeaways on the Los Angeles Lakers after their final preseason game, which was a dress rehearsal versus the Sacramento Kings. After that, I'm interested in who has the best chance to get the 2 seed out in the Eastern Conference. We all can agree that Cleveland is most likely going to get the 1 seed out there, but there's 3 teams I think that are in the running for that 2 seed. So we'll break that down. Then at the tail end of the show, just a brief look at the MVP race this season, which in Vegas is showing up very clearly as a 3-person race. We'll talk about those 3 as well as who I think is the best long shot candidate. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. It's also super helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. Jackson's doing incredible work on our social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Make sure you guys follow us there for great content throughout the rest of the season. And last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. We are going to have mailbags basically weekly throughout the regular season. We will have one coming up on this Friday. So I'll be pulling questions from the comment section on this video, as well as the comment section on our 3 lives that we have going on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night. That's our schedule this week. Obviously, the 5 big questions today. Then we'll live on Tuesday night, live on Wednesday night, live on Thursday night, mailbag on Friday. All right, let's talk some basketball. So first big question as we head into the start of this season: can Shai Gilgeous-Alexander take the leap to become the best basketball player in the world? We had a debate, if you guys remember, in our mailbag like a week or 2 ago, and talking about the idea of like, we have this theoretical kind of 2 telephone poles that are holding up a wire, right? And that's Nikola Jokic, who's the best player in the world right now. And then there's this onslaught of Victor Wembanyama. And we don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know when he's going to take that leap to officially become that guy. But what if there's a gap in there? What if there's a gap in there where there's a spot for someone else to jump up, whether it be a Luka Doncic or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and an Anthony Edwards? And one of the things I said in that debate is that I didn't think that Shai could become the best player in the world because he doesn't have like a second thing that he's transcendently great at. And we were talking about like how Ant has this defensive potential. He may or may not ever realize it, but maybe he has that potential. And then Luka has this ability to score at volume and at efficiency the same way that Shai does, but that also has this transcendent playmaking gift, right? And so honestly, I was watching the preseason and Shai is just remarkably locked in. He was 20 for 24 from the field in preseason, 10 for 12 on jump shots, 5 for 5 from the mid-range, 5 for 7 from 3, that 3-point shot he's been working on the last few years, 7 for 7 on all off the dribble jump shots, 9 for 11 at the rim. Just completely ridiculous shot making, and it looks every bit as good on tape as it does in the box score. His start-stop quickness is completely off the charts. He's dusting dudes off the dribble. He had this like snatchback dribble move against Brandon Miller in a Hornets game, going down the right lane line where he planted that right leg going full speed and pulled it back. And Brandon, who's a great athlete, just goes like flying off the screen. And Shai just easily goes forward to his left and lays the ball up. Everyone else looks like they're stuck in the mud. And all I could think was, as I was watching that, was I'm an idiot for thinking that Shai doesn't have the potential, at least, to become the best basketball player in the world one day. I was really caught by his playmaking. He had 16 assists to just 6 turnovers in roughly 57 minutes of preseason action. For those of you guys, I look at those of you guys who've been looking at the show for a while, I typically look at per 36 as a way to kind of translate whether it be a small role player who's playing fewer minutes per game kind of look at what their production looks like at larger scale, or in this case, in preseason when they're not playing their normal 36-minute type of nights, right? Shai averaged 10.1 assists per 36 minutes. To give you guys some perspective, he was at 6.7 per 36 in the regular season last year and 6.3 in the playoffs. Also a 2.7 assist to turnover ratio. Obviously a small sample size, but the point is Shai somehow looks even better than he did last year. And, I've been wrong before, and it's kind of a natural part of this business. I'm sure I'll be wrong many more times in the future. But when I was like thinking back on that, I was like, that might be one of the worst takes that I've ever had. It is completely absurd for me to insinuate, even if I don't think he's there yet, and even if there's a chance that Victor comes on too quick or that Luka blows us all away and proves himself to be a better player this year, it's absurd for me to pretend as though Shai can't become the best basketball player in the world. He absolutely can. He's actually closer to it than we think in a lot of ways. Like, he needs to get more consistent in the postseason as a scorer and efficient. Like, he fell off a cliff last year in efficiency from 64% true shooting in the regular season to just 57 in the playoffs. That's a precipitous drop off. He needs to get a little bit more efficient there. Needs to take a little bit of a playmaking leap, which he's showing a bit of in preseason. But again, like, I just want to get out in front of that in the sense that, like, I was wrong. And I just, rather than going down with the ship, I'd rather just admit that I was wrong and move forward. And the truth of the matter is like, I've been too low on Shai's big picture potential. He absolutely has the potential to join that conversation with the very best basketball player in the world right now with Nikola Jokic. I still think it's Jokic right now. I think Wemby's coming. I think it's going to be hard for Shai to outpace Wemby when Wemby gets to his peak, but there very well may be a pocket in time there. And I think, I have the players that I'm drawn to. I'm drawn to playmaking naturally. And I do think that scoring archetype like Shai is a little bit tougher. I think you've got to be transcendently great at it, but he is transcendently great at it. And if he takes a playmaking leap this year and he gets up over 7.5 assists per game, that closes the gap with Luka on the playmaking front in a way that I think it starts to complicate that conversation. And so I just want to, again, get out in front of that. I was wrong to say that. I think Shai absolutely has the potential to become the best player in the NBA, maybe even sooner than later. One of the specific things that I've noticed in preseason too is just his willingness to take easy reads early in possessions. This was one of his things in the postseason that kind of ebbed and flowed with his game management, but his scoring ability is becoming such a damn problem for defenses that when he starts to probe off the dribble a little bit, they're fully compromised. They're completely throwing their attention and effort at him. And so you're starting to see these like really easy kick out reads that he's taking advantage of early in possessions, and it's getting the engine flowing for Oklahoma City's offense early. He's making those reads consistently. If he does that, it's going to keep his teammates in rhythm night to night, and it'll even loosen up the defense on him to make things even easier on him as a scorer. And last thought on SGA before we move on, I've just really enjoyed watching starting five with him and just getting to know him a little bit more on a personal level from the access that we get from that show. First of all, I absolutely love Starting Five. If you haven't watched it yet, it's on Netflix. I highly recommend you check it out. It just does such a wonderful job of capturing like the cool of the NBA and its players. Like, I fell in love with this game as a kid. I'm sure most of you guys did too. And you just idolize the league and you idolize the teams and you idolize the players. They become like almost like they become like fantastic to you in a lot of ways, right? And I just thought that show has done an amazing job over the last couple of years of just kind of immersing us in the NBA in a way we don't get to just by watching the games. I really enjoyed watching it, and I've just really enjoyed watching Shai and just kind of learning a little bit more about his personality. Talked a lot about his consistency and just how his daily process is the same, and that's why he's consistent in his performance on the court. I love the perspective he offered as it pertains to media criticism. I've always talked about how like media criticism kind of comes in three phases for players. When you're young, everyone's just excited about what you're great at, and all we do is talk about how amazing you are. And even when we talk about your weaknesses, we talk about them in the context of, yeah, well, you're eventually going to get better at that. Like, oh, like Wemby just has to work on this. If he figures this out, like, oh man, the league's in trouble. It's like even criticism takes on a positive connotation. And that's like a phase that Victor Wembanyama is in. And then there's like this middle phase. And in the middle phase, all of a sudden the dynamic changes. We're no longer comparing you to the lesser players in the league. We're comparing you to the very best basketball players alive. And when you're doing that, all of a sudden it becomes kind of nitpicky. It's like, well, he's not as good at this as some of his peers are at the top of the league, or he's not as good at that. And that's where Luka is right now. That's where Shai is right now. That's where Giannis has been in the last few years. And part of it is kind of the reality. It's a blessing and a curse being one of the best basketball players in the world. Like, you're experiencing all the fame and success that comes from it, but it comes with you being juxtaposed amongst the greats, and that just comes with criticism. And like, that's the thing. We're not comparing Shai to Zach LaVine. If we're comparing Shai to Zach LaVine, it's going to be an overwhelmingly positive conversation. But if we're talking about him compared to Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic and Giannis Antetokounmpo, it's going to come with a lot of criticism. It's kind of like a healthy part of the discourse in that environment. You're being welcomed into a very exclusive club. And then there's like a third phase, right? Which is Steph and KD and LeBron. Those guys, they're just, no one's comparing them to the top guys anymore. So no one's being that nitpicky. Everyone just kind of has a profound respect for them for the most part, except for some bad actors out there, right? And so the coverage turns overwhelmingly positive. So like Luka and Shai and Giannis, those guys are all stuck in the hardest part of it right now. And what I liked about seeing in the show, Shai just talked about how it doesn't really get to him because he's harder on himself than the fans are, or than the media is, or than even his coaches are, is what he said in the show. And like, I thought that was really interesting perspective, because not only does that drive you, but it's one of those things where I thought back to the last year's playoff run where he had some struggles with game management. He came through every time when they needed him to. Like for all of the bad games in there where Oklahoma City's offense fell apart, every time the chips were down and the title was going to get determined, he played a good floor game. And so it's a testament to self-awareness. It's a testament to the fact that he is his biggest critic and that he uses that to push himself. I've just really enjoyed watching that show to get a little bit more perspective on who Shai is as a person. And again, I just want to get out in front of that. Like, I have been underselling Shai's big picture potential. I don't think he's the best player in the world yet, but I think it's foolish for anybody to insinuate that he can't get there. And when I said that, I was wrong, and I'd rather just get it right. So that's all I got for Shai for right now. Let's move on to question number 2. What's up, guys? I'm super excited to tell you about our new partnership with Rag & Bone. I got this jacket from them about a month ago. Grew up in Tucson, not much jacket wearing going on down there, but I just moved to Denver, and now like every single time my wife and I are going out to dinner, you got to throw something on to keep yourself warm. And this jacket is, quite frankly, the nicest piece of clothing that I've ever owned. You guys know how it is with denim. Like, sometimes it's just like stiff and uncomfortable. This infused denim from Rag & Bone is already broken in when you put it on. It just has that like feel of quality, but also that like soft and comfortable type of feeling you don't expect to get from denim. I have a pair of their jeans and a jacket. I've just been super impressed by the quality. It washes super well. It's super comfortable. It looks amazing. If you look at their over-dye process, they have an 8-step over-dye process that gives each piece this like super rich and dimensional color. From the quality materials they use to just the level of craftsmanship, everything's just made to last, and everything just seems to get better with each time that you wear it. And then again, like, this is an investment in your wardrobe in the long run. This is stuff that is going to last, that is going to build and be a foundation for your wardrobe as you continue to get older. I've just been super, super impressed. They have every single type of fit that you could want when it comes to denim. They don't just have denim too. They've got tees and knits and other types of jackets and every single thing that you would need to put your whole look together. It's premium wardrobe staples that are made to last and made to live in. It's time to upgrade your denim with Rag & Bone. For a limited time, our listeners get 20% off their entire order with code HOOPSTONIGHT at ragandbone.com. That's 20% off at rag-bone.com with promo code HOOPSTONIGHT, HOOPSTONIGHT. When they ask where you heard about them, please support our show and let them know that we sent you. How many teams do I actually think are capable of beating Oklahoma City in a series? I was thinking about this concept after watching Minnesota last year in the postseason. We talked about kind of Minnesota when we did our player rankings and when we did our contender rankings, I talked about how like Minnesota kind of needs Denver to fall to number 4 and beat Oklahoma City in the second round in order for Minnesota to get out of the conference. Because I don't think Minnesota can beat OKC. They have like a couple of key weaknesses in key areas that affect that specific matchup on both ends of the floor. So, for instance, on offense, Oklahoma City has this combination of like real athletes that can get up into Ant, guys like Lou Dort, guys like Alex Caruso, guys that like Ant's not going to have this unbelievable athleticism advantage against, but then they also can protect the rim. And we've seen variations of that even beyond Oklahoma City when it was Derek Jones Jr. and Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. Ant suddenly went down a big level offensively, right? So like Oklahoma City presents that athletic on the perimeter and rim protection dynamic that Minnesota struggles against. Secondly, Minnesota is not a high-level processing team. They were 19th in turnover rate last year, 18th in assist-to-turnover ratio. They can shoot the ball plenty well. They got plenty of shooting, but they don't have great passers. They don't have a lot of ability to quickly process the defense, move the ball through it, get it to the open man. And as we know, Oklahoma City can be so aggressive that that's the way you beat them. You beat them by passing through their defense and knocking down open shots. And then on defense, Jaden McDaniels, for whatever reason, and I think it has a lot to do with him just being upright. I think the Jaden McDaniels type is like too tall and easy for Shai to be shifty against and to beat off the dribble. We saw Andrew Nembhard, a smaller kind of fire hydrant guard who's very quick laterally and great at anticipating Shai's moves. He was the guy that made life harder on Shai because he was able to beat him to spots. And so in a weird way, Minnesota's defense built around Jaden McDaniels is not a great matchup for Shai. He can't keep him in front. Some of that was game plan. We talked about the unnecessary ball pressure, but I just think in general, Shai's good at getting lanky players out of position. And so that's one of the, it's just a tough matchup for Minnesota. And then finally, even when both teams do successfully contain the ball with their rim protection and their athletes, Shai's just way better than Ant right now as an over-the-top scorer. So I don't see a scenario where Minnesota can overcome all of those things and beat Oklahoma City. Not in 1 year of improvement. And I'd even argue that Oklahoma City is going to get more internal improvement than Minnesota will this year. So I don't think Minnesota can beat Oklahoma City. So with that being in like kind of the framework for this discussion, who can beat Oklahoma City? Now we've talked about Denver. I picked them as my championship favorite. I was on with the Nerd Sesh guys last week, and I had like a 45-minute debate with Carson at the top of that show, going back and forth about that specific Denver-Oklahoma City matchup. So I'm not going to spend any time on that today. If you want to see that, we talked about it in our contenders preview, and I talked about it at length with Carson. But I gave Denver what I said to Carson was 53-47, like very, very, very slight advantage towards Denver in that specific matchup. The gist of it is just the Jokic problem. He's an entry point for their defense. High IQ defenders on the other end of the floor, the ability to kind of make Oklahoma City think. And that combination of playmaking and play finishing, which I think is so important to beat Oklahoma City. So let's talk about that. Let's move on past Denver and let's talk about what you need to have to beat Oklahoma City. Because again, for all these other teams, every other team that I list here, no one's picking them over OKC. OKC is going to be the gambling favorite. Oklahoma City is the team that I will pick. It's the team that you should pick. Oklahoma City deserves to be favored versus all of these teams. But in order for them to have an upset threat, what do they need to have? So first of all, it's that combination of playmaking and play finishing. Oklahoma City does a ton of gambling, playing passing lanes, double teaming, fouling. They play super physical. They beat the shit out of you from the opening tip, hoping the refs won't call anything. And they just force a lot of turnovers, and then they run it down your throat the other way in transition. So you have to be able to space the floor, and you have to have high-level playmakers that can pass through that without turning the ball over. And then you need guys at the tail end of those sequences that can knock down shots or finish at the rim as cutters, vertical spacers, whatever it is. You need to be able to pass through their defense and finish. I don't think it's a coincidence that Denver and Indiana were the two teams that had the most success against them last year. Both of those teams are super smart, super organized, and loaded with playmaking and play finishing talent. Now, as we know, Indiana's out of the conversation for this year. So now we're into the upset territory. So this is the second piece of it. I think if you're going to upset anybody in any sport, you have to have some kind of legitimate advantage. Another way to kind of frame this is to say, yeah, they might be better than us, but we're better than them at this thing. That's what you need in order to have an upset. So, for instance, over the course of a series, this thing, whatever it may be, has to rise to the forefront and kind of dominate the flow of the game on both ends of the floor. That can be a kind of thing that can counteract a talent advantage. You got to have some sort of leg up on them, right? So for Denver, it's self-explanatory, right? They have the Jokic piece of it. They are a much bigger and more physical rebounding team. So they have a couple of clear advantages. That's a big part of why I view them as a substantial upset threat versus Oklahoma City, right? But let's talk about the rest of these teams. I want to start with Cleveland. This is the only team I have in the Eastern Conference that I actually think can beat Oklahoma City. To start with, they have a nice set of circumstances. They're in a weaker conference, and they have a much better chance of making it to the finals, in which case they would just be standing with Oklahoma City as the only barrier between them and the final and the trophy, right? The second piece of it, though, they're a high-level playmaking and shooting team. They were top 5 in assist-to-turnover ratio last year. They were second in three-pointers made, second in three-point percentage. So when Oklahoma City is throwing the kitchen sink at them, Cleveland can move the ball through their defense. They can get to these open threes and they can knock them down. And then lastly, this is that key piece. I think Cleveland has a couple of advantages. One, I think a healthy Darius Garland is actually capable of taking advantage of Oklahoma City's bigs in space. He's going to be able to get the ball into the teeth of their defense and break them down at the point of attack. That, I think, is a legitimate advantage there. Two, they are a much, much, much better three-point shooting team than Oklahoma City. Those are real advantages that Cleveland could ride to an upset. And for the record, Oklahoma City was 29-1 versus the Eastern Conference last year. Guess who that one loss was against? The Cleveland Cavaliers. So they're my one team in the East. I don't think the Knicks can beat them. They're a solid playmaking team with a high assist-to-turnover ratio, but they're a mediocre three-point shooting team. They're 8th in percentage, but only 24th in makes. I also don't think they have a big enough advantage anywhere else. Like Jalen Brunson is just a lesser version of Shai. I think that's a matchup that clearly favors Oklahoma City. They have some bigger guys like Cat and OG Anunoby that could take advantage of Oklahoma City's smaller perimeter players, but none of them are good enough at passing the basketball. And we kind of saw this with Julius Randle in the conference finals series, but like the big bully ball player that doesn't read the floor super well, that dude gets chewed up and spit out by Oklahoma City. And we saw that with Jared Jackson. We saw that with Julius Randle. So I'm not as optimistic about guys like Cat or OG Anunoby having great series against the Thunder. Orlando, no way. They don't pass or shoot the ball well enough. They were a bottom 5 assist-to-turnover ratio team last year. Worst jump shooting team in the league by a mile. Yes, I know they added some guys. It won't be enough. And then we go down a significant level in talent from there. Milwaukee doesn't have the players. Indiana and Boston are hurt. Atlanta doesn't have the players, even if I like them as a regular season team. I think Detroit's too young to win that type of matchup. So the only team in the Eastern Conference that I actually think can credibly give Oklahoma City a run for their money is Cleveland. Out west, I have 4 teams here. And several of them I strongly contemplated leaving them off. But again, I'm trying to keep my options open here in terms of the theoretical upset. We're admitting Oklahoma City is picked to beat these teams, but do they have a shot? Starting with Houston, I almost left them off this list because of the ball handling issue. I just think you have to have high-level ball handlers to move the ball through Oklahoma City's defense. And with the loss of Fred VanVleet, it pretty quickly goes from Kevin Durant to Reed Shepherd and Alperen Şengün, who I think does a decent job managing defensive attention, but it's not great at it yet. So like that theoretically would be a death sentence in this type of matchup. But I left them on because they have a couple of advantages. So first of all, their front line is just ridiculously massive. And they're far and away the best offensive rebounding team in the league. Those are things that can give Oklahoma City issues from time to time. And then secondly, they're an elite defense With a player in Amen Thompson, who theoretically is like the perfect type of player to deploy against Shai. He's got a good combination of size, but also insane lateral quickness to potentially be able to beat Shai to spots. I think a guy like Amen would struggle with Shai early in a series, but after he got enough opportunity to really look at his moves and kind of dial him in, I could see Amen to be the type of athlete that could give Shai a little bit of a harder time deeper into a series. They're essentially, the Rockets, just too good to write off completely. I worry about their lack of ball handling and shooting in this matchup, but too good for me not to give them an upset shot. I'm going to list both LA teams here, although I think they're both long shots. The Clippers have really high-level playmaking talent. They're not a particularly great three-point shooting team just in terms of volume. They're a good percentage team, but not by volume. Zubats is a big advantage, just a monster inside that can cause Oklahoma City some problems, so I'd give him an advantage in this series. My main concern would be Kawhi does not handle double teams well. And we saw in the Denver series how that looked. Oklahoma City would just do a better version of that. But I do think they at least have the talent to have an upset shot. For the Lakers, it's just that perimeter size dynamic that we've talked about. Like Luka and LeBron are much bigger than Oklahoma City's primary perimeter defenders. That gives them a little bit of an edge in terms of being comfortable getting to their spots. And then they're both super high level playmakers, and the Lakers are surrounding them with a lot of play finishing talent. We actually saw this in their regular season matchups post Luka trade. Again, that doesn't mean I would pick the Lakers to win. I'd pick the Thunder to win. I think the Lakers have a huge athleticism disadvantage. But as a proof of concept, we at least saw how those big ball handlers that can pass with good play finishing had the ability to score against Oklahoma City. I think that gives them at least an upset threat. But again, my main concern for the Lakers would be they have no hope to guard Shai. It'd be a game planning series. JJ would have to pull a David Adelman and mix up coverages a ton, run a bunch of zone, and just get super gimmicky and hope that OKC missed a ton of shots, which is what makes them such a long shot. Lastly, the Golden State Warriors. And, ironically, it's their defense that makes me think they have a shot. Jimmy and Draymond and Al are like the perfect trifecta of like old, smart, savvy dudes to have on a backline to kind of play into OKC's indecisiveness. Especially with a guy like Draymond who's so good at like having a foot in the paint, but then throwing the kind of closeout that'll scare the shit out of the dude who's shooting in the corner, right? And so I just think that they would actually be able to play Oklahoma City into some pretty substantial offensive lulls. And then from there, there's a lot of things that would lead you to believe they wouldn't be good in this matchup. Like they don't have a lot of three-point shooting. They don't have like a super reliable offensive player off of Steph. But Steph does create a lot of different types of opportunities in terms of bringing two to the ball. He would absolutely go attacking guys like Chet and guys like Isaiah Hartenstein in space and at least create some 4-on-3s where Golden State does have a strength in terms of their overall playmaking talent. So in just in general, I think Golden State represents the older, smarter type of team that can give Oklahoma City some issues. But to be clear, all four of those teams upset threats does not mean that I would pick them. I would pick Oklahoma City over all four of them. That was it for me in the West. I told you guys how I don't think Minnesota can beat them. San Antonio just doesn't have the talent, as we've talked about most of the summer. Dallas doesn't have the ball handling or shooting. And then we fall off a cliff to the rest of the teams in the West in terms of talent. Today's show is brought to you by our new presenting sponsor, Hard Rock Bet. Tomorrow is opening night for the NBA, which means it's time to shoot your shot on Hard Rock Bet. Your home for hoops action all season long. Need a little help with your first bet? Check out the streaks heating up inside the Hard Rock Bet Stats Hub. You can find live odds and bet on all these streaks right in the Hard Rock Bet app. The Warriors have won and covered the spread in 7 straight games as road favorites against the Western Conference. The Thunder have won 6 in a row at home against the Western Conference. If you haven't tried your first bet on Hard Rock Bet, there's still time for you to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Just place a $5 bet, and if it hits, you get not only your winnings, but $150 in extra bonus bets. Plus, all week on Hard Rock Bet, you can get an NBA parlay boost for the games. There's new promos every day. Boost your same game parlay or same game parlay max so your bet pays extra winnings. There's new promos daily, so if you're listening to this later, just open up the app and check out what you've got any day of the week. Download the Hard Rock Bet app today and make your first deposit. Third question, can the Lakers survive without LeBron James? I watched their dress rehearsal against Sacramento on Friday. A lot of good, a lot of bad. I've been generally underwhelmed with the Lakers in preseason so far, but I'm trying to keep an open mind because they haven't played all their guys that much. Luka looks great. He scored at a rate of 37 points per 36 minutes in preseason on 65% true shooting. I think people forget how much of an absurd volume and efficiency scorer Luka is. And I think we're going to see that in a big way to start the season with LeBron James out. Luka's 3-point shot is super locked in right now. He's 10 for 19 overall from three, 8 for 14 on his pullback three, that step back three, which is obviously one of the most important shots for him right now in terms of his scoring volume. Still plenty of room for improvement though for Luka. Like he was just 1 for 7 on short twos. Again, that's like floaters and jump shots inside of 17 feet. Those are the shots that I think when he's making puts him closer to the Jokic tier on offense, because that's that like hyper reliable short range scoring mixed with the insane scoring volume and efficiency mixed with the ultra high level playmaking. That's when he starts to enter into those conversations. So I'm a little bummed because that was a big problem for him with the Lakers last year. And then he did really well with the short range shot making over the summer with Slovenia. Not so good in preseason, but it's 7 shot attempts. So I'm not about to lose my mind. I'm just saying it's an area of improvement for Luka to keep an eye on to start the year. The lob chemistry with DeAndre Ayton is really off right now. That was a big thing that stood out to me in the Sacramento game. There were like 3 or 4 easy rolls where Ayton was wide open and Luka and Ayton just couldn't connect on the pass. Not too hard to figure out. That lob chemistry is something that takes time. It's very much a timing thing. We've talked about this a lot this summer with De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama. But it takes time to kind of get like dialed in terms of like, does he want me to jump with this footwork or that footwork? And it's more for Luka to figure out. Ayton is Ayton. Ayton's going to do his thing, but Luka's got to figure out the timing. When does Ayton want the ball? What window am I passing to and when? That's the kind of stuff that Luka's got to figure out, because like, the team actually looks pretty sharp in their offensive execution, and they're running a lot of good stuff. They've been running a lot of stack pick and roll, but in the stack actions that they've been running, they've been getting good lobs for Ayton, good corner kicks, but it hasn't showed up in terms of efficiency yet because they haven't been able to connect on that vertical spacing piece of it. So again, something to keep an eye on. Luka's playing great, but he still hasn't figured out his vertical spacing window, and he still hasn't figured out that like kind of short range shot making piece. So point being, Luka can still get much better. Still don't love what I've seen from him on defense in preseason. No big deal, just preseason. He's been scoring at an insane clip. Something to keep an eye on though. He's still dying on screens and complaining at the refs, getting beat off the dribble. Let's just say that if there is some sort of like new skinny Luka devotion to defense, it didn't show up in preseason. Just something to keep an eye on. Again, overall, I think in terms of their execution, I think they're ahead of where they need to be on offense, but behind where they need to be on defense. Not hard to be surprised by that. This is a team that I had pretty low defensive expectations for to start the year. But on offense, again, they're running good stuff. JJ's talked a lot about working on their screening, and they are setting really good screens. In their stack actions, one of the things I noticed against Sacramento is a lot of NBA teams do this, but they know teams want to run stack. And so all that stack pick and roll is, for those of you guys who haven't heard on the show before, it's just a pick and roll at the top of the key with a shooter underneath the basket who comes up and tries to back screen for the roll man so that you can keep an opening for a lob. And if the shooter's man helps on the lob threat, then the shooter can relocate to the top of the key and he's wide open. It essentially just makes it so that it's far more likely that either the roll man or the shooter gets open versus just a regular 2-man game where it's a lot easier for teams to defend that action 2-on-2. It's more likely to bring in help, right? But a lot of these NBA teams, what they try to do is they try to jam up that screener. So essentially, as the guard is trying to run up to back screen for the roll man, the guy who's guarding the guard will basically shove him off his line and try to prevent him from getting into position to set that back screen. I actually thought Sacramento did a pretty good job of that in this game, but they were able to set that screen enough times to get some openings. And in general, I have been pleased with their screening throughout the preseason games that I've seen. They're running some really high level stuff. I like where the offense is at. There's also a lot to be excited about in terms of guys being in rhythm. Luka's shooting the ball really well, like we talked about. Rui is in a good groove right now. Gabe Vincent is shooting off the charts. We'll talk about that in a minute because I've seen a lot of pushback from Lakers fans about the idea to start Gabe Vincent. I think it's defensible. We'll talk about that in a minute. Austin Reeves had a struggle in the Sacramento game, but he's generally been great in preseason, scoring at a rate of 25 points per 36 minutes so far in preseason. Only real beef with Austin is I was hoping he'd come into camp a little bit more sharp with his three-point shooting. He was 5 for 22 from three in preseason, 3 for 14 off the dribble, and 2 for 8 off of the catch. It's just his biggest weakness right now. I thought that was pretty clear after the Minnesota series. So I was hoping he'd come out a little bit hotter, but I'm sure he worked on it all summer. Let's just hope that that translates at some point soon in the regular season. But in general, again, I think they're in a decent spot on offense to start this year. On defense, I still think they have a long way to go. You can see them executing their stuff. Like, you can tell that JJ's trying to get these guys organized. They're just not quite at that like game speed level of execution yet. They're just like a step behind on most of their coverages. When you're already a step behind athletically, you can't also be a step behind mentally. You're going to put yourself into situations where you have to recover, and you're just not the type of team that's going to be super fast in recovery. I'll give you guys an example, like on their X outs. So like all an X out is if you bring low man coverage over. So let's say that the guy that is on the opposite corner steps over into the paint to help on a drive. When that happens, there's a 2-on-1 that forms on the weak side, right? The guy who's helping, his man's in the corner. Then you have the guy at the top of the key, on the opposite wing with his defender that's kind of sinking into the lane there, right? All an X out is like, rather than me, the helper underneath the basket, sprinting all the way out to the corner, why don't we have the guy who's guarding the guy on the wing drop to the corner and I go out to the wing? That's the X, right? So guy on the wing goes to the corner. I'm helping under the basket. I'm going up to the wing. You're Xing past each other. That's why they call it an X out, right? So in that specific sequence, there was a play against Sacramento where Luka steps over as a low man, gets into the lane to offer help. Then all of a sudden, when the ball gets contained, Luka turns to Gabe and yells, X out. And Gabe runs to the corner and Luka runs to the top of the key. But the whole thing just looks slow and stuck in the mud. And there's an easy swing pass to the out to the right corner. And Luka's man gets a wide open three that he just happens to miss, if I remember correctly, on this possession. And the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, like this is the kind of thing where they're just a little bit behind. Like if Luka anticipates that a second earlier and calls it out, then Gabe has a good chance to chase him off of that shot into an extra pass where Luka, because he has an extra pass worth of time to get out there, can probably get out there. And now all of a sudden we're taking away that open shot and forcing them to make a couple of additional plays in order to get a good look, right? Those are those types of like little mental execution type of details where they're a step slow right now, where they need to be sharper. You can see it in their peel switches. You can see it in some of their transition defense in terms of like getting back, stopping the ball, getting to the basket, fanning out to shooters. They're just on everything. They're a little bit slow right now. I think they're working in the right direction. I had hoped that they'd be a little further along at this point, but I don't think this is a team that's going to come out and be 15th in defensive rating in the first month. I think this is a team that's going to come out and be 23rd, 24th in defensive rating in the first month. Marcus Smart showed a lot of good in that game, but not in the ways that I think people were hoping. Like he was able to force a turnover, jumping a driver in transition where he kind of jumped the right-hand drive and got a steal, went out the other way. He showed some ability to rescue plays, hitting some tougher shots. So like late shot clock, no one's really open. Hits like a rainbow three off the left wing. He had another play where late in the clock, he put the ball on the floor and hit a little jump shot in the middle of the lane. You can tell he's got a lot more refined offensive skill than some of the other guys that have played that position in years past. But I don't think he's looked particularly fast. I don't think he looks like he's ready to guard superstar guards to start the season. I don't think he looks like a primary point of attack option yet. Now, hopefully he continues to get his legs underneath him and then he eventually gets to that point. But right now, I don't think Marcus looks like a solution to their point of attack problems. So again, as we kind of zoom out on the defense, I didn't have super high expectations, but I will definitely be watching them because they're a little bit behind where I'd like to see them be at this point in time. Really quickly, before we're done here, I want to talk about that decision to start Gabe. So JJ Redick starts Gabe against Sacramento, tells reporters that that would be a starting lineup in the Tuesday game. For the record, I personally would have started Vando. I'll explain why in a minute. But I do think it's hilarious how I've seen so many Lakers fans get upset at this decision. I think Gabe Vincent is a perfectly fine option to go to among several flawed options. So first of all, who are the options? Marcus Smart, Jared Vanderbilt, Gabe Vincent, and Jake LaRavia. I don't think you could make a case for any other guy. And so as we start going through those four guys, I don't necessarily see any of them as the obvious choice. Like Lakers fans are clamoring for Marcus Smart. And by the way, if he was faster, he looked quick and ready to handle that massive point of attack job, I'd be right there with you. I don't see that yet. To me, he seems like a guy who should be coming in off the bench and just doing all the little Marcus Smart stuff that he does in that context until he gets his legs underneath him. Maybe in a few weeks or a few months, but I don't see him as an obvious pick right now. Jared Vanderbilt would be my pick. The reason why is I think he's athletically ready for the job. He makes the lineup more physically imposing. All of a sudden, with Vanderbilt out there alongside a giant DeAndre Ayton, a giant Rui Hachimura, and a giant Luka Doncic, you're pretty big. He raises the athletic profile of the lineup. Obviously, offense and spacing would be difficult, and that's the downside. I also like that it appropriately slots Gabe as a secondary ball handler, right? So if you have LeBron, Gabe's your fourth best ball handler. He can really slot in anywhere at that point. But with LeBron out, all of a sudden he's your third best ball handler. And so you can accomplish that through staggering, like pulling guys out and putting them back in certain ways. But I think it's just a little bit more natural if you bring Gabe in off the bench. That said, even Jared Vanderbilt is not a perfect option. He's just 2 for 13 from 3 in postseason, had an ugly air ball that was about 3 feet long into the left out of the right corner against Sacramento. He's 5 for 11 on layups. So he's been given 24 layups and threes, and he's converted them into 16 points on 24 openings there. The shot looks better. I'm a big believer that it takes time to translate standstill shooting to practice shooting to game shooting. So like, I'm not giving up on Vando as a guy who could potentially in the future become a guy who can knock down a catch and shoot jumper, but he's clearly not that right now. And he still is struggling to finish layups. So he's not an obvious pick. He's who I would pick, but I don't think it's obvious. Jake LaRavia has looked slow, and he's 3 for 13 from 3 in preseason. So it's not like Jake LaRavia has earned the spot either. So the point is there is no obvious choice. What Gabe does provide is a guy who's solid at everything. He's athletically quick enough for the job of guarding opposing guards, even though he's obviously undersized. That would be a downside, as he obviously lowers the athletic profile of the lineup. But Luka, Rui, Ayton is still a pretty big front line. They're not going to be tiny. They're just not going to be as big as they could be with Vando. Gabe can dribble, shoot, and pass well, so he can kind of do any role in the offense. And he's been in a great rhythm since the start of preseason. This is crazy. Gabe Vincent is scoring at a rate of 26.2 points per 36 minutes in preseason. He's 15 for 27 from 3. And it wasn't just the nuclear showing in Vegas against Dallas. I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch that game. I watched it live, but Gabe came out and hit like 5 threes in the first 4 minutes and drew a foul on another. Just went like absolutely ape shit to start that game. But then he came out in a smaller role alongside Austin and Luka. Was 4 for 5 from 3, 14 points, 0 turnovers in the Sacramento game. He's playing well. So what JJ sees is a guy who he can trust, who he knows will execute the game plan, who's capable of the defensive job, and who's shooting the shit out of the basketball as of late. So yeah, is Gabe the long-term solution to the starting 3? Of course not. But I think he's a perfectly defensible option to start the season with. Overall, on the Lakers, I don't think they're as sharp as they need to be to get off to like a great start this year. I don't think they're going to be awful on defense, but I think they're going to be pretty bad. I don't think they're going to be amazing on offense, but I think they're going to be pretty good. If they're going to be pretty good on offense and pretty bad on defense, that's a mediocre team, right? So I don't think they're going to get off to some great start. That said, the one thing that might save them here is they do have a pretty light schedule to start the year. And that might be exactly what they need to survive this stretch without LeBron. Looking at the schedule, Golden State and Minnesota to start. Obviously, a couple of tough games there. You split those, you're happy. But then Sacramento and Portland, who both are feisty and both have some issues. Sacramento's athletes gave Austin some issues. Portland All of you Golden State fans who watch Golden State over the preseason, you saw how feisty Portland can be. They have a lot of good players. They're young and athletic and have some decent ball handling above what you would think for a team that lost Scoot Henderson. So those are going to be tougher games, but those are games that you feel like Luka should be able to do enough damage in that you can win. Then Minnesota again, that's tough. Portland again, winnable game. San Antonio, winnable game. Atlanta, winnable game. Charlotte, winnable game. Oklahoma City on the road without LeBron, that's probably a loss. New Orleans, winnable game. Milwaukee, winnable game. Utah, winnable game. Utah, winnable game. And if you get to there, that gets you to November 23rd. And you hope to have LeBron back by then. So I do think the Lakers could play mediocre basketball to start the season and still be 9-7. And I think 9-7 with LeBron coming back is not a bad spot to be. I think a huge win for the team would be if LeBron came back on the 25th and your team's at 11-5. So that I think is going to be a nice little barometer for how they've started the year. So in short, I haven't been super impressed by the Lakers in preseason, but they have a light schedule to start the year, so they have a good chance to survive in the standings without LeBron. Question number 4. Which Eastern Conference team will separate from the second tier and compete with Cleveland at the top of the conference? I like Atlanta as a regular season team to potentially steal the top 4 seed, but I don't think they're good enough to like go win 57 games and get the 2 seed. I've been impressed by Boston and Indiana and their basketball cultures in preseason. They're both going to be a pain in the ass, but neither has the talent to hang with Cleveland. The Bucks don't have the talent. Miami doesn't have the talent. Kello Wares looked great in preseason. I still don't think they have the talent to be a 2 seed. And then Philly just won't get enough games out of their stars, right? So that basically leaves it to 3 teams: New York, Orlando, and Detroit. So assuming Cleveland ends up with around somewhere between 56 and 62 wins, I think it's more likely they end up around 56, 57 because Darius Garland's going to miss part of the start of the season and they're not trying to outpace Boston anymore. So I don't think there's going to be as much night-to-night motivation in the regular season. But I still think it's reasonable that they'll be right around like 57, 58 wins, right? That means one of these teams, in order to get to the 2 seed, has to win about 55 games. I ended up putting Detroit at the bottom of this trio. They won 44 games last year. I like the moves for Karis LeVert and Duncan Robinson. I am a big believer in Cade, and I think he'll be better. I think he'll improve as a 3-point shooter and improve as a late game decision maker. But we did get some tough news about Jaden Ivey's knee. It looks like he's going to be out to start the year with a surgery to relieve some discomfort. So I kind of look at them as right around like 50, 52 wins for Detroit. So I don't think that's enough for them to get the 2 seed. New York is interesting. They were the 3 seed last year. So another way to frame that is to say they were basically the best non-Boston, non-Cleveland team. So they already are essentially kind of in pole position here. They'll have a healthier roster because Mitchell Robinson's going to be ready to go. They have a new coach. New coaching typically results in like a motivated start. They're running in transition at a higher rate to start camp. They're getting more fast break points. Excuse me. They're moving the ball more. I do think they're going to be better on both ends of the floor. So I think like 55 wins is on the table for the Knicks. But I actually am going to go very slightly with Orlando here as a team that I think is a tiny bit more likely to get that 2 seed. And really, it's all about their physical imposition on the game because I haven't loved everything I've seen from them in camp. They're still not as like deliberate and smart with the way they attack on offense as I'd like them to be. But I think they're going to be a great regular season wins machine just because of their overwhelming size and physicality. Again, this was a team last year that was devastated by injuries. Jalen Suggs misses almost the whole year. Franz and Paolo both miss multiple long stints of games, right? And they still went 41-41 because they're huge and they're physical and they're great at defense. And that sort of thing does show up every night in the 82 games. You take that, you inject talent with Desmond Bane, firepower. Not only that, but talent and firepower that directly addresses a need on the roster. Both deadly catch and shoot shooting and a real dynamic off-screen scoring threat that will open up opportunities for their offense that they haven't had in the past. If they are healthy this year, they have that combination of strong defensive foundation and just enough offensive firepower to win some of the closer games that they've lost in recent years. So I give this Magic team just a tiny bit higher chance to end up getting around that 55, 56 win mark and staying close to Cleveland. I still don't love them as a playoff team because I'm not a huge fan of their coaching staff and the way they play on offense, but I do think they have the overwhelming talent and physicality to churn out wins in the regular season. If I had to guess right now, I'd say that the top 4 seeds in the East in mid-April are Cleveland, Orlando, New York, and then Detroit, with Atlanta being the team that if any one of those teams experiences injuries or massively underachieves, I think Atlanta is the team that kind of pops up into that group. And again, like the injuries can happen. We just found out that Jaden Ivey's out, right? All right, last question for today. Who's going to win MVP this year? First of all, who typically does win MVP? You got to be on a team that's winning a ton of games, and you got to be putting up insane numbers. You got to be playing at that top tier superstar level. The guys at the top of the league are too good. You're not going to get like a just for fun MVP award from the second tier when you know that Jokic is going to average a 28-point triple-double and Shai's going to be like 33, 5, and I think Shai's going to get up to like 7 assists a game this year. So like, it's just going to be really difficult for anybody to outpace those guys, right? So those two are the obvious ones, right? The Thunder are going to win 60-plus games. They're going to be the 1 seed. Shai's going to put up insane numbers. Shai's got to be in the MVP conversation. Then Jokic, I think Denver's going to be a top 4 seed in that brutal West. He's going to average a 28-point triple-double. The on-off numbers are going to be insane. So those two are obviously the kind of like foundational MVP favorites to start the season. So who else can meet that criteria? I thought about KD. He's had some buzz, and I think the Rockets as a team have a chance to be good enough. But the problem is Şengün is very much the foundational player there. And I think it's just going to be too hard for KD to put up the necessary numbers to compete with the guys at the top of the league. So even though I like KD, love that fit there in Houston, I just don't think KD is going to be able to have the type of season he needs to seal the MVP from one of those top guys. Giannis will put up the numbers, but I just have a really hard time envisioning the Bucks winning enough games. I was really thinking about this with respect to Wemby. Like, Wemby has De'Aaron Fox, like a legit dude who can go out and like consistently get into the high 20s, low 30s and bring real firepower. Giannis doesn't have that alongside him. It's going to be really hard for the Bucks to move up the standings. Like, yeah, if the Bucks get the 2 seed, then Giannis is MVP. It just feels like a long shot to me. Spurs, same thing. Wemby feels like a long shot because I just don't think the Spurs are good enough. I'd be stunned if they got a top 4 seed. I wouldn't be stunned if Ant ended up getting a 2 seed, but I just don't think he's as good at SGA at the key things that he needs to be able to kind of circumvent that case. And Ant is also playing on a very talented roster, as we talked about. Like when we were talking about the Spurs and their roster, who's the team I used to juxtapose with them? Minnesota. Naz Reid's a really good player. Rudy Gobert's a really good player. Julius Randle's a really good player. Jaden McDaniels is a really good player. The Timberwolves are pretty stacked with talent, so I don't think you could give Ant the like he's got the lesser team case to get the MVP either. So really the only other guy that I think has a good chance is Luka. And it's because Luka is gonna be able to score at the rate to put up the numbers, right? Like he scored at a rate of 37 points per 36 minutes in preseason. And like if I said that Luka averaged 33, 9, and 9 this year, that's not like me being outlandish. That pretty much falls in line with what we would expect. If I asked all of you guys to just guess Luka's stat line for the season, most of you are going to come in right around there. Those are MVP numbers. So if the Lakers get up to like the 2 or 3 seed in the West, which they literally were the 3 seed last year, that means Luka's got a good chance to get MVP. So if you look at it, those 3 feel like the only real candidates: Luka, Shai, and Nikola Jokic. And by the way, if you go look in Vegas, it's those 3, and then it's a massive drop off before you get to Giannis and Victor Wembanyama. So if I had to pick one out of those 3, I think it's going to be Shai. I think the Thunder are going to dominate all year long. I think Shai is actually going to have somehow a more impressive statistical season than last year. I think he's a player that's in the middle of mastering his craft. I think Shai is going to end up getting MVP. But if I had to pick a long shot guy, I think I'd go with Victor. Again, I think there's a world where some of these other teams in the West get banged up. The Spurs stay relatively healthy. You get a massive bounce back season from De'Aaron Fox where he averages like 26 points per game, plays really good defense. Victor Wembanyama drags them to like 53 wins. They get the 2 or the 3 seed. And Victor's averaging something like 28 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, and 5 stocks a game. And is far and away the best defensive player in the league. And if he does that, that is where you have a case like what I was talking about with Ant, where that team is severely limited in talent compared to some of these other teams in the league. If Victor gets them to a top 3 seed and puts up those kinds of numbers, I think that's a really strong MVP case because Jokic has the best roster he's had in his time as a Denver Nugget. The Thunder have the most talented roster in the league. Even Luka Doncic is playing alongside LeBron James and Austin Reeves, right? So like, I think that's our best long shot threat is Victor Wembanyama just having one of those special seasons and sneaking in there to get MVP. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. That's it for the preseason. No more theoretical basketball, no more fake basketball, only real basketball from here. Very, very excited to get into it with you guys again. Remember, Tuesday night live on YouTube, Wednesday night live on YouTube, Thursday night live on YouTube, and then a mailbag on Friday before we take the weekend off and get back into it next season. Again, as always, I appreciate you guys for supporting us and supporting the show. I will see you tomorrow night on NBC for our first bit of NBA regular season coverage. We're going to get, I guess, a look at Michael Jordan as a analyst there as well. That should be entertaining. All right, guys, I will see you on Tuesday night.